Góðan daginn, góði gestir og velkomin hingað í höfuðstöðvar Íslandsbanka, hingað í Norðurturnin og við erum svo sannarlega stolt af því að fá að hósta þennan fund eða vera gestgjafar hér í dag í samvinnu við Almannaróm. Og það er búið að vera miklar og skemmtilega fréttir undanfarið þar sem að samkomulag náðist í vikunni og tilkynnt var samkomulagt við opin al. Þannig að það er ýmislegt spennandi að gerast í þessum heimi. Við hjá bankanum erum að nýta okkur þessa tækni nú þegar og ætlum svo sannarlega að halda áfram að þeirri vegferð og við erum einmitt hér með fulltrúa frá okkur í dag sem ætlar að ræða þetta frekar. Ég ætla reyndar að gefa orðið yfir til hennar Jóhönnu Vigdísar sem er framkvæmdastjóri hjá Almannaróm. Hún ætlar aðeins að fara í gegnum dagskrána. Það eitthvað verið að bíða eftir ráðherrum sem að klára fund en hún ætlar að afsaka það og ég læt hana það. Bara takk fyrir komuna og þetta verður skemmtilegu fundur.
Já, komið í sæl og takk kærlega fyrir að koma hingað. Eins og Birna sagði þá erum við með 2 ráðherra á dagskrá og að hafa ráðherra á dagskrá er svona eins og treyst á íslenskt veður og ætli útilegu. Við vitum ekkert hvað gerist og við gerum ráð fyrir því að þau munu koma hingað af ríkisstjórnarfundi, mjög fersk en ég ætla nú bara allavega að byrja á því að segja takk Birna og takk Íslandsbanki fyrir að halda þennan fund og ástæðan fyrir því að við erum hér er eins og Birna sagði, við erum búin að vinna mikið með OpenAI og auðvitað að máltækni. Þetta er stór hópur fólk sem hefur unnið að því að búa til máltæknilausnir, þessa innviði undanfarin 4 ár og svo sem 25 ár sum þeirra þar á undan. Íslandsbanki er fyrsta stóra fyrirtæki sem að tekur máltæknina inn og býr til svona metnaðarfulla máltækni áætlun. Orri að símanum ólastöðum auðvitað, því það við náttúrulega gert ýmislegt og mjög flott. Takk fyrir það. En þannig að þetta er forsagan. Við fórum þarna til Bandaríkjanna í Kísildal með fullt af gögnum og innviðum fyrir máltækni og reyndum að selja þetta til þeirra fyrirtækja sem að hafa mest áhrif í þessum bransa, vegna þess að við viljum auðvitað sé hægt að tala íslensku við þau tæki og í þeirri tækni sem að fólk notar dagstaglega. Og tókst að koma á góðu samstarfi þar sem að miðin tóku boltan og hafa unnið undanfarna mánuði með OpenAI að því að koma þá íslensku inn í þetta GPT-4 mállíkan sem að varð til þess þá að íslenska er fyrsta tungumálið sem er fínþjálfað í því neti fyrir utan ensku, við erum stolt af því. Þannig að þetta byggir allt saman, þetta er löng saga, þetta er máltækni áætlun stjórnvalda, þetta er 60 manna hópur sem hefur unnið að þessu, þessi sendinefnd forseta og svo þetta samstarf. En dagskráin í dag, hún er þannig að Sigríður Hrefna Hrafnkelsdóttir sem er framkvæmdastjóri einstaklingsviðs Íslandsbanka og Vilhjálmur Þorsteinsson, hann er stofnandi og framkvæmdastjóri miðeindar. Þau ætla að setja í sameiningu að segja frá þessu verkefni, máltækniverkefni Íslandsbanka. Nú svo ætlum við að stökkva í panel sem að Rían Dreyer sem er framkvæmdastjóri upplýsingatækni og stafrænnar þróunar hjá Íslandsbanka, hann ætlar að stýra því og í þeim panel verða þá Orri Hauksson, það eru Angela Young frá OpenAI og Vilhjálmur Þorsteinsson frá miðeind og svo stekkur Bjarni Benediktsson inn, fjármálaráðherra og Lilja Alfreðsdóttir, hún ætlar að koma líka, hún ætlar að halda svolítið erindi og að segja frá máltækni áætlun stjórnvalda og eins og ég segi, við þurfum bara að hafa svona, við þurfum að vera til í að vera svolítið svona í flæðinu, hérna, varðandi dagskrá ráðherranna og við þurfum bara alltaf að vera ánægð með það. Það er ekkert mál, þetta verður bara mjög skemmtilegt, þannig ég ætla að biðja Sigríði Hrefnu og Villa að koma fyrst upp.
Já, góðan daginn öllsumul og afskaplega gaman að sjá hér fullan sal af áhugasömu fólki þessa nýju tæknibyltingu sem við erum svona að stíga okkar fyrstu skref í. En við ætlum að fá aðeins að deila með ykkur, já við erum bara á þessum svona kumpanlegu nótum, tölum bara Villa og Siggu og við ætlum aðeins að fá að deila með ykkur svona okkar verkefni og þeirri vegferð sem við höfum verið á. Að ég byrja kannski bara aðeins að forsögunni, okkur Íslandsbanki er að sýna máltækni og svona þessari gervigreinda tækni svona mikinn áhuga. En við hófum okkar stafrænu vegferð hér 2017 þegar við byrjum á að taka stór skref í umbreytingum á þjónustum fyrir einstaklinga. Og síðan þá höfum við alltaf verið í þessari endalausu fróðleiksleit og svona í þeirri leit að því næsta stóra sem að gæti haft áhrif á bankaþjónustu og gert hana enn aðgengilegri og enn þá betri. Það var 2017 í nóvember að okkur var boðið að koma á Fintech Festival í Singapúr og ég man að það var fyrsta skipti sem ég sá möguleikan á því að einhver gæti spjallað við einhverja vél og beðið stöður á bankareikningi. Og ég svona hugsa með mig, já, einmitt, æðislegt að eiga íslensku. Þetta ekki möguleiki fyrir okkur. Og þá kemur Villi.
Já.
Eins og riddarinn bara.
Eins og Gervigreindur hérna. Já, gaman að vera hérna með ykkur. Miðeind sem sagt fyrirtæki sem fór á stað, má segja, í þessa vegferð í máltækni 2015 og hefur svona smá saman verið að auka skriðþunga sinn. Og það sem að fólk kannski þekkir best af okkar afurðum, það Embla, sem sem sagt raddaðstóðar, svona snjallmenni sem í símanum hjá fólki. Þú getur gripið símaðinn og ítt á takka og tala við Emblu á íslensku og hún svarar þér á íslensku. Og bak við þetta heilmikil máltækni, þetta náttúrulega talgreiningin, þetta úrvinnsla úr fyrirspurninni og svo að ná í svörin og svo þetta raddgervingin sem svarar þér aftur. En við erum líka með svo sem fjölmargar aðrar vörur sem að byggja á því að lesa yfir íslensku, þýða íslensku yfir önnur tungumál, þýða önnur tungumál yfir íslensku og svo framvegis. Og ég svona veit ekki alveg hvernig þetta kom til en það einhvern veginn komst á þetta samtal milli okkar og Íslandsbanka það hvort að það væri möguleiki að nýta þessi íslensku máltækni í rekstri bankans.
Við byrjum í júní 2020 að þá í rauninni tökum við svona fyrsta gervigreindar framlínu starfsmann okkar í vinnu og við ráðum til okkar, hann Fróð okkar og ég hef nú iðulega kallað Fróða sem minn einkason en við höfum unnum að Fróða í frábæru samstarfi við Advania sem umboðsaðili fyrir norska félagi Boost AI. Við kynntumst Fróða mitt á svona samkomu í Noregi og fjallum strax fyrir þessum möguleikum sem að gervigreindin gæti boðið okkur upp á. Og Fróði svo heldur betur búinn að sanna sig í þjónustu fyrir okkar viðskiptavinni því að hann á vaktinni allan sólarhringinn. Hann að spjalla við 7.000 manns í dag á mánuði og hann að geta klárað 95% af sínum verkefnum alla leið. En það sem að okkur langaði var svona hvað getum við gert meira með Fróða og þá hófum við þetta samtal við Villa og þau og svona sjá bara gætum við gert eitthvað með íslenskuna því við vissum að þau voru komið vel á veg með flottar lausnir og svo kemur ChatGPT og þú veist og allt breytist þannig að við erum afskaplega glöð með þetta samstarf og væntum mikilsæði því að það mun hafa mikil áhrif bara á okkar þjónustu fyrir okkar viðskiptavinni því að þeir eru eins og við þekkjum af öllum toga og með ólíka þarfir og afskaplega gott að geta leita sér upplýsingar bara með því einu að nota röddina sína.
Já, mér minnir þetta, ég fór að hugsa þetta, mér minnir að það reyndar að vera jafnvel bara ára ástefnu sem almannarómur hélt einhvern tímann svona stöðu máltækni og það sem var svolítið hvatning til atvinnulífsins að fara svona grípa alla þessa grunnvinnu sem var búið að vinna og fara að gera úr því vörur og þjónustu fyrir viðskiptavinni og það var fulltrúi í Íslandsbanka á þeirri ráðstefnu, ég man að það kviknuðu svona ákveðnir nestar og og það fæddist eiginlega þessi hugmynd að svona búa til nokkurs konar máltækni áætlun fyrir Íslandsbanka. Hvernig gæti svona banki tekið svolítið utan þetta, séð tækifærin, greint þau, fundið hvar kannski best að byrja, hvar svona, svo ég sletti low hanging fruit, hvar ávextirnir sem auðvelt að ná í. Og þar svona fór þetta af stað, rúlaði þessi bolt af stað.
Algjörlega. Og þetta raunin í 3 þáttum, eins og vilja segja, þú veist, við erum náttúrulega að vinna með Fróða, að koma honum í það að hafa rödd, þannig að Fróði geti, tekið á móti skipunum. Við erum líka að vinna að ákveðnum verkefnum sem snýr svona meira að viðhorfsgreiningu viðskiptavina okkar. Og nú náttúrulega gæti einhverju lögmenn í salnum bara svona hvað eru þið að gera? Þetta náttúrulega sjálfsögðu allt saman ógreinanlegt og ópersónugreinanlegt með öllu, en gefur okkur rosalega mikla og mikilvæga innsýn inn í bara hvernig viðhorf viðskiptavinarins á hverjum tíma, hvernig líðanin bara hvernig samfélagið svolítið því að við getum þurft að mæta ólíkum viðmóti og ólíkum aðstæðum hverju sinni, en líka það sem tæknin gerir okkur að við förum í það að við getum mótað svona ákveðna tegund af hvað sem málrómi, svolítið að við sem banki sem að tala í einum rómi með samþættum hætti í öllum okkar dreifliðum. Þannig að þetta snertir, þetta ekki bara eitthvað raddstýring og eitthvað rosa skemmtilegt, þetta snertir svo marga þætti. Þannig að við erum komin í tilfinningagreind og við erum komin í gervigreind í svona ákveðnu samskiptahegðun og svo fleira. Þannig að það það skemmtilega sem þetta færir okkur svolítið.
Já, það orðið, nánast ótrúlega hvað er að gera með þessari textagreiningartækni og gervigreind sem tengist í að það til dæmis hægt að taka erindi sem berast inn til bankans, svo sem þegar fólk að fylla út eyðublað á vefnum og með einhverjum erindum, eða eftir öðrum leiðum og það hægt að greina bara eiginlega, fyrsta lagi nokkurn veginn hvað þetta erindi, þetta innlán, þetta vandamál með krítakort eða hvað það kann nú að vera. Í öðru lagi hægt að greina hvort þetta sé jákvætt eða neikvætt eða hlutlaust eða jafnvel þetta sé eitthvað svona krítískt sko, og þá hægt að flokka erindin og merkja þau svona samkvæmt þessu meðal annars og svo náttúrulega hægt að vera með þessa svona almennu mælingu bara nánast frá bara degi til dags eða viku til viku hvernig svona sentimentið sem birtist frá viðskiptavinum gagnvart bankanum að breytast.
Og þetta rosalega mikilvægt fyrir okkur því að við lifum á viðskiptavinum okkar og eiga gott samband við þá og geta boðum upp á góða þjónustu, það bara lykillinn af öllu sem við gerum. En kannski það allra skemmtilegasta svona fyrir okkur sem Íslendinga og það sem að almannarómur og hefur verið að stuðla að með ríkisstjórnin líka að þarna erum við að byggja upp gagnasöfn. Við erum að byggja upp gagnasöfn fyrir íslenskun okkar. Við erum að varðveita það mesta gull sem við sem þjóð eigum, að það er tungumálið okkar. Þannig að núna með allri þessari þróun og þessari nýtingu á okkar eigin tungumáli, þá er ég allavega sannfærð það að við og sérstaklega við sem banki, að við virkilega getum verið að styðja við okkar framtíðarsýn, að það er að segja að skapa þarna ákveði virði bara fyrir samfélagið í heild sinni. Að við viljum vera að stuðla að því að það verði varðveisla þetta flotta tungumál sem við eigum til framtíðar.
Já, ég verð að hrósa bankanum fyrir það. Það er alveg sérstaklega tekið fram í máltækniáætluninni sem við erum að vinna saman að bankinn sé tilbúin til þess að gögn sem eru þess eðlis, ekki sem sagt trúnaðargögn eða eitthvað slíkt, að það megi gefa þau út eða þau geti nýst öðrum það sem að það gagnast íslenskri tungu og þau fáið mörg prigg fyrir það. Því þetta við erum öll í þessu saman svolítið, sko. Íslenskan, þetta svo lítill markaður að menn geta eiginlega ekki svolítið verið að vinna þetta hver í sínu horni, það verða allir að leggja svolítið í púkið.
Algjörlega og við náttúrulega okkar markmið og það er okkar hlutverk sem banka, svo ég prómóti það nú aðeins og auglýsi það nú aðeins og við ætlum ekki að sletta að það er náttúrulega verið að hreyfa allt í góðra verka og þetta er bara okkar hlutverk og við metum þessu svo að það er okkar samfélagslega skylda að við skilum tilbaka þeim gögnum sem hægt að nýta til almannaheilla. Þannig að það er nú svo.
Íslandsbanki, vonandi íslensku banki líka.
Íslensku banki, allaleg sko.
En talað ekki bara íslensku, samt að við skulum líka hafa í huga að það eru býsna margir viðskiptavinir bankans sem ekki tala íslensku og auðvitað þarf líka að velta því fyrir sig hvernig þjónarðu þeim hluta landsmanna og sem er stór og mikilvægur og það er eitt af því sem við höfum komið nálægt líka í máltækniáætluninni, það er þá að hjálpa til við vélþýðingu, að vefsíður bankans séu líka aðgengilegar á öðrum tungumálum og þá líka að fólk geti sent inn erindi á öðrum tungumálum en íslensku og fengið þau þýtt, sem sagt að þau séu þýtt inn í málefnakerfi bankans.
Algjörlega, en þið heyrið, þetta er hraði. Við erum að nýta okkur tæknina til þess að hraða, til þess að bæta þjónustu, til þess að auka skilvirkni, til þess að auka framlegð og framleiðni og það er bara það sem þetta gengur allt saman út á. Við erum lítið samfélag og við þurfum að geta nýtt allt það sem við getum til þess að geta sótt vel fram. Það er bara þannig.
Akkurat. Svo er varðandi fróða, gaman að segja frá því sko að því þú nefndir Boost AI, þar eru við ekki að tala einhvers konar samkeppni við þá lausn, heldur fyrst og næst að geta bætt ennþá meira við fróða, þannig að hann geti skilið ennþá breiðara svið af íslenskum fyrirspurnum og svarað, má segja, alla leið og þá getur það skipt máli til dæmis hvar er notandi staddur þegar hann heldur á símanum og hann getur hann spurt hvar er næsta útibú eða hvar er næsti hraðbanki og þá getur við svarað í bara í rödd strax, ekki bara vísaður á einhverju vefsíðu heldur bara farið alla leið með svarið.
Algjörlega. Þannig að það eru mikil tækifæri í þessari tækni heldur betur fyrir okkur og skiptir okkur miklu í þeim framfaraskrifum sem við ætlum að taka fram á við. Þannig að við erum afskaplega ánægð með þetta samstarf og þökkum afskaplega mikið fyrir frumkvæðið og bara samstarfsviljan. Það skiptir okkur miklu máli. Þannig sækjum við fram, hún á árangri.
Já.
Ætli við séum ekki samt að vera búin að bladra frá okkur allan tíman. Hvað segir fundarstjórinn?
Það er bara alltaf góðu sko.
Já.
Við getum bara að skipa hann.
En það ekki, eitthvað svoleiðis. Ekki nema að sé eitthvað spurningar, má opna það, Jóhanna, hvað segir fyrst að við erum að bíða eftir ráðherrum hvort sem er? Allt kýrskýrt í þessu.
Það er svo gaman að bladra, ef ég má bæta við þá sko GPT-4,
Já,
það er fréttir, það er nýjung og þegar við settumst niður og gerðum þessa máltækniáætlun og gerðum þessa greiningu þá er hún svo sem byggð á því sem að kalla má hefðbundin máltækni og þeim möguleikum og tólum sem þar eru. Nú er þetta nýja gervigreinda líkan komið með býsna góðum stuðningi fyrir íslensku og hann á eftir að batna ennþá frekar. og það mun opna sko ennþá fleiri möguleika, ekki bara á bættri þjónustu fyrir viðskiptavini heldur líka þá í innri ferlum bankans, styðja við þjónustufulltrúa, styðja við starfsfólk, svara spurningum upp úr þekkingargrunnum bankans, draga saman texta og svo fræðins. Það ég held að þarna sé að opnast alveg nýr heimur.
Alveg svakalega og við sjáum bara rosa mikið tækifæri þarna í þessari tæknilausn bara varðandi, notendaupplýsingar, varðandi, bara sjálfvirkni í flokkun og bara greiningu og öðru slíku fyrir okkur. Þannig að við erum bara rosa spennt fyrir því sem að þessi nýja tækni mun færa okkur að geta, eins og segi, leyst þar með íslenskuna líka að vopni. Það bara ekki spurning, sko. Bara sóknarfæri. Og
þetta verður örugglega víða í atvinnulífinu þar sem að fólk mun verða í þessu svona næstu mánuði að spá núna í nýja möguleika og finna aftur þau verkefni þar sem að hægt að beita þessu með hámarks árangri á tiltölulega stuttum tíma.
Absolutt, ekki spurning. Ekki spurning, eða ekki? Jú. Það glæsilegt.
Kæra þakkir og þá ætlum við að skipta yfir í ensku, það nú viðeigandi á svona fundum íslenskuna, en Ríandra ætlar að koma hingað upp á samt fólki í panel, Angelu, Orra og Vilhjálmi og það akkurat það kannski sem skiptir mestu máli núna að skoða hvernig við getum nýtt þessa tækni, þessa nýju möguleika sem að við gerum okkur grein fyrir að þetta ekki bara fyrir íslensku mikilvægt, þetta líka mikilvægt og þetta bara almennt fyrir viðskiptalífið, hvernig hægt að nýta gervigreind í eitthvað rekstri. Þannig að, Rian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I guess as I was sitting here, I was thinking to myself, I wish NLP was further advanced, that I could just sit here and have the bogglefish, what was it called in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in my ear and just hear everything. But the funny thing is we're not that far off from actually getting to that point. And I think that's what makes it such an amazing time to be in banking and for that matter to be alive in terms of how technology is changing. So I would like to invite the panel up and for a couple of discussions and questions. While they're coming up, I understand Bjarni is on his way, so he'll join the panel as soon as he arrives. When Joanna asked me, I guess I have to disclose that Joanna is my wife, so I have a vested interest to be here. I was a little bit like a fanboy because I am, as you may have already noticed, incredibly excited about AI and the opportunity that it holds. And I've spent literally the last 3 years reading up, watching videos, and I've got a bit of an OCD personality, so when you get into wanting to study NLP, I start watching videos from what's the mathematical formulas that they're using all the way through to how they prepare the stuff. And then I get to the end and I still don't understand it. And I'm like, clearly there's more to it than just meets the eye. And I think that's what today for me is about, is to be able to have a discussion with Angela from OpenAI. That's, she is directly involved with the product development. So if there's anybody that's got a direct insight into what is happening within OpenAI, it would be Angela. Then we've got Ori that's running one of the biggest companies in Iceland. And he has to face the challenge of understanding. He hears about it every day. You cannot open LinkedIn and not see 1,000 posts about this is the latest thing that is happening. And he must be going home at night like, what am I going to do? How do I change Seaman to respond to these challenges that we're going to face? And then we have Willie there that's sitting on the other side, and he's just full of ideas. He can answer all these questions like this and say, well, there's no problem. I can tell you how to do it. But it's a bit more complex. And then lastly, when Bjarni's going to come, I think there's also a big question we've got to ask ourselves from an economic and a societal perspective. As incredible as these technologies are, they are going to change who and what we are potentially. I was spending time last night. I don't see the New Zealand friends here. That's from. They're also accompanying OpenAI on the trip, and they're looking at protecting the Maori language. And we spent 3 hours talking about language technology. And one of the interesting questions we had was, does language drive culture, or does culture drive language? And then when we go into a world when you have something like NLP technologies that is generating on the aggregate what language should look like, what is that going to do to our culture? And how do we bring those elements in? So I think there's truly some societal and ethical questions that we've got to ask ourselves in terms of how do we implement these things. So I'm hoping that we can get through the PR side of things and talk about some of the real issues, and then also get some insight in terms of where we're going to go. So I want to start off with Angela, and maybe just ask you to give a 2-minute overview of OpenAI, GPT-4, what is it? We all know ChatGPT, we've seen it, but there's more to it. Maybe just what is this product that you have from an OpenAI perspective?
Sure. So starting with the very basics, OpenAI started as a research lab whose goal was to build AGI in a way that could benefit all of humanity. That continues to be the mission. And what we found is that as we're developing AGI, we don't want to do it in a vacuum. And so we've also moved into sharing it as a product. So the GPT models are language models that fundamentally take text in and it gives you text back out. And so these models, turns out, are extremely flexible in doing a lot of really useful things. And so GPT-4 is our most capable and our safest model that we've trained to date. And we just released it last week in some products with partners, but also with a partnership with Gervigreind and the Icelandic government to show how we can improve these language models on languages besides English.
So maybe just to follow on that slightly, you mentioned that you're working with partners and you've had various platforms that has been kind of, or potentially going to be integrated in. How do you see from an OpenAI perspective, how should companies look at the GPT models? How should they approach working with it? What's the potential use cases that you guys believe are the up-and-coming ones to look into?
Yeah, so the first language model that we deployed into products was GPT-3, and we got to learn a lot about how is it useful in products and the economy. I could list off a couple of major use cases, and I will, but I guess one thing is that the reason why we do this iterative deployment is to actually learn from the world and from industry exactly how this is useful. And so when it comes to finance or banking, the question would be when we show you this technology, in what ways would it resonate with your end users or with the problems that you see or you're facing, and then we can usually find some flexible way where text is useful in those use cases. But that being said, there's a couple of ways that we found it particularly useful. It's obviously great at writing. So any case where you have in your day-to-day life, you're doing a lot of writing, it tends to be able to accelerate that. It's also very good at analysis, so you can put words in, and you can do things like summarization or ask questions about the text that you had just put in. Summarize it in a way that's specific to an audience that you might not have written it for. And so it's good at analysis in that way. And it's also quite creative, and so it can be used to create cool marketing lines or things that you wouldn't expect that you might that might resonate with your end users, like a poem about banking or something might be fun. But so there's a lot of spectrum here in terms of the use cases, but they usually fall into those realms of generating text, editing text, or analyzing it.
So maybe moving on to you, Ori, in terms of now listening to that, I am going to take it, welcome Minister, I am going to take it a little bit up towards AI in general and not as specific as it relates to natural language processing. Mm-hmm. But obviously the telco industry have been going through tremendous change over the last couple of years. I mean, if I think back to the early 2000s to what we are now, it's a completely different world. And I guess, how do you, from a Siemens perspective, think about AI? Or is it still too early? Is it something that you read about and say, well, maybe we'll get to that in the next year or 2 or 3?
Yeah, well, I mean, we as a service company, we you could say roughly that we touch upon something like half of Icelandic homes and half of Icelandic companies. We've never thought about AI as an end product or anything that we deliberately are thinking about as something that we want to do, irrespective of what's the end goal. Until maybe now, because to date we've just been thinking about different technologies, be it robotics or be it any way of automizing, increasing productivity, increasing personalization towards our customers, and now AI obviously is coming into that field. We've had a specific focus on language technology, and only recently that began to you could say, to overlap with, for instance, help of Miðeind. So, so the questions about are there jobs that will be extinct and so on, we've just thought about AI as just another technology. I think the difference is maybe that the AI is advancing so rapidly, so maybe we have to think about it more carefully than just another way of increasing how you do things. But just to Angela's point, I think it was only 3 days ago that I discovered on a personal basis how powerful this is, because I had the privilege of being in a birthday of my coworker who was 50 years old, and it became my duty to throw a speech, and I had some lyrics involved there. And when it was not great lyrics, by the way, but still, one person there in the birthday came to me afterwards and said, "Wow, this was such a good use of GPT." And I was like, "Well, actually, I wrote it myself, but it's the greatest praise I've ever got, being linked to GPT." So,
yeah. So maybe I'll give Bjarni a bit of time to just catch his breath, but really, it sounds to me like we have a really cool technology that's being developed. It is still, from a corporate perspective, a little bit early days. We're still figuring out where to find our feet. You that's in the product side of things that is directly servicing customers, because I think it's fair to say OpenAI is more B2B2C as opposed to directly yes, we can work directly, but it's mostly through other product providers. What would your message be to Ori about the timing of looking into AI generically and NLP more specifically?
Well, this has come quite suddenly, as you were saying already, the rapid change. The change has been very rapid, and the general capabilities of GPT-4 have only emerged, and very recently, of course, for Icelandic. And I think everybody is kind of still, a little bit reeling and, estimating what this will mean. We are, yes, at a very early stage, but this is a big revolution. It is, as I've been saying, I started my career when the personal computers came out, then came the internet, then came the web, then came the smartphones, and now I'm here to witness this revolution here. I think that is probably the biggest one of those, but it will play out, we're still in early days, and it will be similar to what we have seen with the other ones. This will become ubiquitous. The question is just, at what time frame, but I think the time frame is going to be shorter now than for many of those earlier ones.
And Willi, if I can just chip in, Willi just told me half an hour ago that because he's helping us with our speech technology towards our set-top boxes. So you can, instead of having the remote control, you can speak in Icelandic. But then you have to, there are some English phrases, maybe the names of movies or names of the actors. So for instance, if you're in Icelandic, ask the set-top box to have a movie with Tom Cruise. Actually, in Icelandic, it's very similar to Tom Cruise, which is an empty. So it might be misled, but Millie just told me, now this technology has the ability to distinguish.
Yeah, that's an example. We're actually now using OpenAI's Whisper to do speech recognition for Icelandic. And it's much better at it than the previous technologies, and much better at this language switching. Yeah. So, that's one example of, there are these realms that are just opening up very rapidly. Yeah. We're all learning. I think businesses will be adapting, and there will be some use cases that are going to fall out pretty quickly, that are very obvious and easy to enter into, and then there will be a long tail of applications going forward.
So maybe on this front, so clearly we are in the early days, but it takes us time to adjust and respond. And I think, Bjarni, the government published a paper in 2019 around the fourth revolution and what it means for Iceland. And I think it was very interesting when they spoke in there about potentially 60% of all jobs in Iceland are medium to high risk for being impacted by automation and AI in the foreseeable future. I couldn't find in the report exactly what the time frame is, but let's just say 5 to 10 years. And I guess the question is, changing and preparing the country and the economy for such a change. How's the government thinking about these changes with AI coming that is seeming to speed up and not really slow down in terms of the pace of development?
Yeah, well, it's true that change is happening very rapidly, and what we've been focusing on in recent years is the digital transformation, digital services, and we've invested a lot in making public services available digitally, and I think we still have a long way to go. I'll get back to that a little bit later, but the strategy basically is that we want to see AI used in everybody's best interest. So you have to ask yourself what is the role of the government or the authorities when technology starts developing and the companies are developing a tool which can be used in many ways in society. So that's like a main focus point in our strategy is to make sure that this is used in everybody's best interest. Now we want to see the digital transformation also happen in the workplace, and as I mentioned, we are starting investing and implementing new services through Stafrænt Ísland, Digital Iceland. Now, I think also an important part of our strategy is that AI should be applied to the educational system and for the benefit of the schools and the pupils. I think we are at very early stages. I think it was just this morning I read a statement by the head of the University of Iceland where he said, well, we still are, relying on the students to apply good ethics. So we're watching, and we'll see where this goes. And I guess everyone here has heard examples from the schooling system where there are stories that, youngsters are starting to apply AI when they are turning in their papers. And I've certainly heard a lot of stories. So I think these are important factors for us to start out with. Let's make sure that this is used for the good of people, but also it is important that we want to be open for the workplace and for the public service sector. And thirdly, let's see how we can make good use of this for the educational system.
I want to come back to that educational one, but I'm going to pivot to Angela, because I think it's actually one of the good things about ChatGPT at the moment is that it's not very accurate. It kind of hallucinates every so often, as you may have heard. Some people call it's very convincing liar. So it gets factual things wrong. And I think there's two parts to it. So I'm just thinking about the education system. Can you imagine you are one of those unlucky ones that submits a paper that was generated by ChatGPT and it had the wrong facts in it? So, but I think two elements to that. One is, how do you see, and OpenAI made a very interesting choice to be an offline model, which I suspect has got lots to do with the historic experience with Microsoft and so forth for online models. But how do you see, one, the accuracy of these models improve over time? And two, if I'm a corporate and I want to use it, how do I make sure that it becomes accurate? I mean, I can't have Frodi telling a customer that we have a branch in, I don't know, some part in Iceland where we don't even have any presence, just because it thinks that that's what the person wants to hear. So how do you address that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's definitely not a fact engine, and we warn users of ChatGPT or these models that the models do hallucinate, so it says things that are not true, and often in a way where it sounds like it knows. But that being said, like there are a lot of things that we're doing to reduce that problem over time, because, I mean, just as a product, it will become more and more useful the less and less it hallucinates. With GPT-4, it went, yeah. Actually, some people actually really enjoy the hallucinations.
Yes.
Like if you're writing fiction, right, like hallucinations are great, but not everybody, not in professional services, et cetera. But right, so I mean, it's a big research topic right now. So as an example now with GPT-4, from our internal benchmarks, it's actually 40% less likely to say something that's inaccurate, which is a huge jump from GPT 3.5. And we're going to continue pushing because it's just a really important research question. But in products itself, I mean, this was really the difference between GPT-3 and GPT-4. We really relied on industry to tell us when this would be reliable enough to deploy to their end users. And with GPT-4, it seems like we are there to actually deploy these in real professional services tools where accuracy and reliability really matters. There's many technical ways around this actually. Without getting too technical into it, there are ways that you can use tools where you take a data set of your company's information, let's say, and tell GPT to only use the data in this database. We find that technique just continues to work over and over again for these kind of services. So it's not something you would see if you just use ChatGPT. It takes some engineering work, but once you do that, actually the reliability just shoots up. And that's really needed in all cases because no matter what, companies have their proprietary data that's not going to be available on the internet and so won't have been available in our training. But if you want to ask questions about your particular documentation or your knowledge base that you typically do research on, then that's something that actually that's a feature that exists now where we can answer questions specifically with that knowledge base. So there's a lot of things happening in research. There's a lot of product solutions towards making this useful and usable. But all in all, when you use ChatGPT, it's still going to lie to you. So that's something to always look out for.
So, Willie, is that where you come in from a product perspective to help organizations like Siemens, like ourselves, to bring in that knowledge base to complement the accuracy? So I guess my question there is, what do you have to consider as an organization when you go through that kind of journey? So what are some of the key things that stands out for you? Is it the volume of data that we need? What are kind of those key characteristics that we need to consider?
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things about GPT-4 is it's so versatile, and as Angela was saying, you can, for instance, instruct it to say, if I ask you about the weather, in that case, you should call out to an external system and ask for the weather data and then come back with it. It can generate SQL for that matter, or JSON, or so it can, by itself, it can decide, is the user now asking this type of question about the bank balance or whatever, or is he now asking about the location of the nearest ATM, or is he just asking a general question? And then depending on the intent of the user, it can generate calls out of different backends. Then that can actually be furnished and then produced back as an answer. So GPT-4 is an extremely powerful language engine. It's not, as you were saying, Angela, it's not necessarily like a fact database. You shouldn't look at it that way, but it can be integrated with fact databases and easily, well, not easily, it's prompt engineering. You have to carefully prompt engineer, but then the system can basically talk to backends. And yes, that is a part of what we are doing and will, for instance, be doing probably in the Íslandsbanki project.
And I guess that's maybe for the non-technical people in the room, just translating to there is still work. You're not gonna just buy ChatGPT off the table and it's going to be working tomorrow. It is still just another IT system solution that you need to construct in order to give you the good results at the end. I'm going to pivot a little bit to the more ethical and I guess societal impact questions, and I think. Oda, I'm actually going to start off with you because I'm curious on your, from just a corporate perspective, and then I think Bjarni can also add in from a government perspective. These models became incredibly powerful for two key reasons. We have lots more computing power, more than we've ever had before in history, and that will keep on increasing. And we have an abundance of data, more than what we've ever had. And that's what made some of these theoretical algorithms that were already developed in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, a lot of these things are not new, but they were theoretical algorithms then, but they now are executable. We can actually run them and get answers not in 20 years, but in a couple of hours. So, but that comes at a cost. And I think especially Iceland as a country is very focused on sustainability. I think most corporates are very focused on sustainability and what are we going to do to ensure that we have a carbon neutral footprint. We're talking of the 2040, the plan of being carbon neutral. So how do you as seamen think about this to know that, yes, I may only be using the end result here, but on the one hand, there's lots of compute. For those of you that don't know, data centers use as bigger carbon footprint than airline travel, right? So we always get very excited about the airline travel. Stop using your phone. That will be a good step to become carbon neutral. The second thing is also there's a lot of data engineering, labeling. People need to go through the data and explain what it is, and that's often done in low-cost locations where, now we start talking about equality and what should we be paying for that work that's happening. Are those considerations that you think a company should have in place when they start thinking about AI, or is those just that's the price of doing business and it will wash out across the whole economy in some way, shape, or form?
I think all the companies in Iceland, especially obviously listed ones, which have lots of requirements regarding what they publish and so on, we have to figure out the whole chain of our vendors, what the footprint is and what have you. So obviously that's a concern. We are still early days, in my opinion. There are lots of things that need to be enhanced there, but this is just one of the, you could say, the procurement obligations that we take on as a company when we use these services. Now, obviously, the good thing is being in Iceland that many of the cloud services here or the data centers here are obviously run by sustainable energy, but we use also cloud services from elsewhere and tracking that all down has, we haven't been able to do that completely as of yet, but that will become more easy. I think also the engineering or using these methods, whether it's all definitely AI in a cloud service or in a data center in Iceland or somewhere else, using methodologies that really reduce the input of a human worker. That is something that humanity has been always thinking about, and all technical revolutions have led to some you could say jobs being extinct, or at least parts of jobs. Obviously, doctors are not extinct, but probably 90% is of what they do today, or 90% is what they did a century ago, they don't do today, because they have technology that augment what they do. And there was this famous story about all the X-ray technicians that would be would be out of job soon because of AI. I think we have never had more X-ray experts in the world. They're just doing different things, and they're not doing all the repetitive tasks that used to be. So I think there are lots of ethical and societal aspects to this, especially from a business point of view. But I think most of these things we've seen in one form or another before, even though this is growing more rapidly than ever, probably. But still, I think we will be able to tackle it.
So maybe just to continue on that front, Bjarni, from a government perspective, and again, you mentioned earlier, one needs to think about what's the role one wants government to play. We currently have the AI, potential legislation within the EU that's being discussed in terms of how we would implement the regulations around that. But what do you think the government's role should be to think through some of the ethical nuances associated with AI, especially given that most of it's either sitting in China or the US at this point in time. And one could argue that there are very vastly different ethical and cultural biases potentially that will be built into these AI engines that we will then deploy within Iceland. So, is there something that the government needs to do around this, or again, is it something that the industry needs to regulate and sort out?
Yeah, I think obviously there is a vast array of things that we need to be careful about. You mentioned something that relates to national security. Are you happy that people are gathering information on your societal behavior elsewhere and storing them in a place somewhere? So you have to, probably will have to make sure that there is some sort of a limit on how far you can reach into the databases of Iceland. So this is something that we are already concerned about and are working on, and has to do with how you categorize public information and make sure that you are aware of those that no one can access. I think also, moral issues, there will be a lot of issues to deal with. However, let me say firstly that instead of getting too worried about the threats, I want to get excited about the opportunities. And I think just from what we've done so far in terms of the digital transformation and digital services has brought to my attention how little we are doing today in terms of using the data we already have to take better decisions. And this can, this can be true for different systems. You could apply this to the tax system, for example. This is, we already started there using AI, so that you don't have to sit with a pile of documents trying to figure out, okay, which one should I look at? Take one from the center and one from the top. No, I mean, the computers are already telling us where something suspicious is going on, and they are using AI so that we are more efficient. Same goes for customs. But when it comes to public finances, I think we are, we almost haven't started using the data. And hopefully AI can point to areas where we can take better decisions in the future. Of course, it's a given that we have to make sure that personal information is protected and so forth. But I think the opportunities are really, really exciting. And I just want to make sure that we don't get too scared, so that we don't make use of the potential that there is there.
I think, and it is truly amazing how much have changed over the last couple of years, both from a digital services perspective, the focus on data in general across organizations, as then at the same time the development of AI on the side. I mean, I can keep on talking the whole day, for those of you that know me, as I'm not shy of talking. So I want to pause here and maybe just ask if there's any questions from the floor that you specifically want the panel to answer. Is there anything specifically there? Back, yes.
Yeah, thanks for a great talk so far. On the ethics topic, I have a question. I mean, we're at this stage where this technology can blow up, but I think it's not very often talked about that it's a non-deterministic technology, right, as Angela talked about briefly. So I would want to hear your thoughts, maybe Angela and Bjarni and others, about governmental bodies concerning ethics, accountability, and responsibility, because obviously this is used a lot in every day already. So what are your thoughts about if this should be regulated to some degree, or if there should be an ethics committee and so forth and so on? Okay.
I'll just repeat the question for the streaming so that people can hear it there. So the question is just around ethics, given the fact that the models are non-deterministic, and the question is what role should government, companies, and or product providers play in managing and kind of having an oversight of the ethical issues. I just want to maybe add to that for those that's not aware, the European regulations, and maybe I'll ask you, Angela, to start off with that, do have a very different approach to, or proposes a very different approach towards the use of AI than a lot of the other regulations out there, where it is a risk-based approach, where the idea would be that there's a classification of industries. There's already a proposal out there. And education is a very interesting one, because education is deemed a high-risk industry, but there's obviously an incredible amount of potential of using AI in transforming the way we teach kids and universities. And depending on your risk classification, there are different requirements be it having an ethical body within the company and so forth. So that's the proposals, and I need to emphasize that it's not law as yet, it's purely proposals. But I'm curious on that one, and maybe Angela from your side, because you have to deal with this across the world. I mean, you work in so many different legislations. How do you guys approach that from an open AI perspective?
Yeah, so I think from the very beginning, we knew that like this wasn't only a technical problem. This was like also like a societal and ethical problem of building AI or AGI. And from the beginning, that's actually been built into the structure of the company. And so most people don't know this, but like from the start, we have a pretty holistic approach to it. We have not only just the research teams, but also policy teams, trust and safety teams, public policy teams that are all built out so that anytime we're making a decision, it's made holistically. Because again, the mission is to not only just build AGI, but deliver AGI in a way that benefits all of humanity, and that requires also taking into account all of these ethical and societal problems. I think we learned a lot just from like watching tech in the past and what happened with social media and whatnot, to know that we had to take a very measured approach with all of this instead of kind of just putting it out there and seeing what happened. That being said, like a lot of it is being developed right now. We definitely don't have all the answers. And so one of the approaches that we take fundamentally is to do like iterative and gradual rollouts of the technology so that we can continuously bring like more and more people into the conversation, like companies and governments, and learn from the feedback. So for example, right now, like ChatGPT is a research preview, and we wanted to put it out there so that we could hear like, what are the concerns that rise to the top, and start working with like legislators and companies to begin addressing them very early on, while the stakes are low right now. I know that we want to work with both. We want to work with industries. We want to work with governments. Our leadership, like Sam and Mira, have called for the need for legislation. So we actually traveled here to Iceland this week with our public policy lead. And her role is to, collaborate with governments to see, bring to the table like our knowledge of what this technology can do, where we see it going, to see, where are the right points to be collaborating. Again, like I don't think anybody really has many of the answers yet. I think many people like have emerging ideas of all the things that you guys had mentioned. But the approach is really to like, first and foremost, have experts in-house, but really be bringing the conversation to everybody.
Maybe on that, and I'm just going to ask Ori maybe to also contribute to this one, is just, listening to this, and it's more maybe hypothetical as opposed to the reality today. Would you expect, so just like anything out there today that becomes automated, there's a certain level of controls and oversight that is required to make sure that it doesn't make stupid decisions. Mm-hmm. Do you foresee that in the future companies would have some more specific focus on ethics, given that we're now getting into a realm where it's not only process automation, but it's language automation, it's going to a completely different new level?
Yeah, I guess if you split like data-based decisions into two fields, one is data-based intuition for humans, and then data-based automation processes which use AI or what have you. Probably most of it you will use AI. I guess we'll tread very carefully there, and we will iterate, and we will try to foresee the outliers in such a situation so that we don't enter into a situation where our automated process is just doing something wrong for our customers, our employees, for someone. So I guess, as Angela is saying, it's early days. If she doesn't have the answers, I don't have them now. But yeah, I think we will try to be easy. Obviously, companies have their ethics committees and all that. But this is a new territory.
It's definitely.
So. But we also are using it. I think to date mostly it's data-based or you could say machine learning-based intuition that we're getting, predictive analysis about our systems, about which kind of employees we should hire, which kind of customers are likely to be not very pleased right now because this and that has happened. But we're not letting the machine loose completely.
Thanks. Any other questions from the floor? Johannes.
On the question of ethics committees within companies, there is a research now that has been looking at 22 ethics policies for both public and private companies and found that most often they were more just a PR spin than an actual decision-making, regulation. Yeah. Is this just, another PR spin?
So maybe just, again I'll repeat it for the live streaming, and I think that is it's a very, so for people that's into the mode of decision making, that's one of the biggest comments that constantly comes up, where yes, there's been ethics committees for a long time. Most people feel that they have been more from public relations perspective as opposed to really thinking through the ethical issues, because that is a rabbit hole that's really deep once you start going into that. So I guess, and I think, Ori, maybe you can just comment on that.
I would second that. I think mostly these committees are not maybe thinking ahead of the curve. They're more tackling something that came up. There was the annual party of the company, and something came up between two employees. Ethics committees is here, and it will take care of it. Yeah. Thinking about something like predictively or ahead is something.
It will have to change. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah. Austin.
Thank you very much for a great meeting. I work within the edutech sector and I'm a design company. So I wanted to come back to what you said, does culture drive language or language drive culture? And maybe a little bit away from we've discussed the ethical issues a lot, but AI is in every single application for innovation projects today. So how will we use this momentum now to drive we talk about education, but how will we invest in the universities and the research, not to focus on the threats, but threats are also there to evoke questions, and that can stimulate research and bring the innovative new ideas, so that we can be ahead here in Iceland. I think it's such a great opportunity for us, for the innovation in Iceland. So how will the government also support that, not to drive it, but how will we boost the universities with research on this within education on all levels?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question. It's actually one of the ones I had here, because I did go and look at the charter of the government as well, and specifically to see what was mentioned in there as it relates to AI and the investment that we talk about. So I'll start the question just around, yes, we've spoken lots about the ethical and other challenges that may be, but there's also a massive opportunity coming from a clean energy perspective, coming from just the access to highly skilled individuals within the country to build an AI industry that could be world leading and have innovative products and innovative capabilities. And I guess the question to Bjarni on this one is that, so the government has recognized that in the charter, saying that there should be investment in the education system as well as other programs, but maybe a bit more details around what has been happening since the charter has been published and what the plans are going forward around stimulating the edtech industry.
Yeah, I think it is a multi-layered approach you have to apply. First of all, I think we were early on working with industries in Iceland on building the infrastructure, the foundation, which now is, we are bearing fruit of that investment today, where we have the capability of being a potential partner language-wise, because we have invested a lot in that. So I think from the government side, we need to make sure that the investment is taking place, and that also applies to the universities. Now, I don't want to go ahead of the universities and maintain that I have figured out how they can maximize their potential as being leaders, as being institutions which offer opportunities for students that want to come and become experts. But I certainly think it's important that we have universities that are well connected with the Society of Universities elsewhere. I also think that we can, by building up general environment for starting companies in Iceland, as we have done in recent years, we poured money into R&D, and from the latest figures I've seen, we are striving to come to the top of the list in terms of public spending on R&D in the society. this has changed the R&D environment in Iceland, and I think from R&D a lot will happen in this field. So those are things that we should be focusing on, and believing that if we just give people opportunity to take this ball and run with it, then good things will happen. And that's exactly what happened in the field of R&D in recent years, and I think AI will be a part of that story.
Okay, it's time for us to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I want to thank the panel. It is not always easy to sit here in front and just answer random questions. I just want to maybe close off to say that in preparing for today, and there's been lots of discussions around consciousness and do AI have consciousness? I thought, there's only one way to find out, and that is to ask ChatGPT, what is the meaning of life? And I have to unfortunately state that ChatGPT was hallucinating, because it gave me like 5 paragraphs on the meaning of life, and we all know the answer is only 42. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for a really interesting panel. And we now have Lilja Alfreðsdóttir, the Minister for Culture and Business, is going to finish this meeting. Lilja, gjörðu svo vel.
Góði gestir, mikið gaman að vera með ykkur hér í dag til þess að ræða sem að mínum mati það mest spennandi sem að gerast í tækninni, og að við skulum hafa tækifæri á því að geta notað íslensku inn í það forrit eru ekkert annað en forréttindi. Because we have foreign guests, I'm going to switch into English because we are so much appreciative of the cooperation we have with OpenAI. So I'm going to use the final the concluding remarks, also talking to our Icelandic audience, but also the great staff and open-minded OpenAI people that we just got to know each other last spring after one of the most amazing meetings I've ever had in my life. Even greater than capital account liberalization, Bjarni. So I just want to go a little bit, I think that I think we all know here how dear Icelandic is to our hearts. And it's not just the language itself and the culture and all the fantastic literature being written in the 13th century, Norse mythology, Thor, Odin, and all these fascinating characters that we love and we cherish. And, not to mention the Icelandic sagas. I mean, there you have, alpha male. I'll tell you about that later. I mean, it's just fantastic literature. But it's also about what kind of a society we want to live in. Because if we are not able to cultivate our language, we'll have lesser reading comprehension going forward. And what happens if our children are not able to read efficiently in our mother tongue? We're not going to be competitive. And there are signs that the vocabulary of our children is decreasing. And I think there are a lot of reasons behind it. It's not just the education system. Actually, my theory on that is I think we're 2 years behind children at the same age of 15 and 16. That's why we're doing worse in PISA. But I think we do a lot of catching up in the next 2 or 3 years. So I'm not overly concerned about the competitiveness of the education system. But going back to the language technology program that our authorities have invested quite substantially, over 2 billion ISK has gone into this program. But what is so great about it is not just the solutions that have been provided, but this is a great example of joint cooperation between the government and startups, and that the end product is so good that we could be in a meeting not only with OpenAI, but also with Apple, Microsoft, and all the big tech companies in the Silicon Valley, and basically, present our case, because we already had done our homework. So I think at this point in time, we are really doing well as regards to, putting these solutions into into solutions that are cutting edge. And we can be very proud of it. And I also believe that the only way for Icelandic to survive and be with us is that we are able to knock on the doors and basically present the latest technology, and it can be transformed into what is taking place. And that has happened with OpenAI. And just as an example, I'm just going to give you a very kind of a funny story at my household. So both my kids, they think it's like the most uncool thing that their mom is in politics. They're like always complaining about it, which I think is completely fine. But suddenly I became a hero one day when they saw a photo of me with Sam Altman. They were like, really, is this what, are you involved in this? And I was like, yeah. And the reason is that, kids already are starting to use it. So my son had a test in English, and I'm happy with the school because they had done oral tests. I'm a big supporter of oral tests because they teach you how to present your case in an orderly manner, and they are difficult, and you can't cheat also. And fortunately, they had this oral test in English the other day, and so his topic was Rosa Parks. And he, of course, put it into OpenAI, please write me a 30-word sentence on Rosa Parks. And, of course, it took him like now not even a minute to get it. And I was like, oh, my God, where is this education? This is going to be. But then, I was thinking, I think we're going to level up education because it really focuses on, memorizing things, looking at new words, new approaches, and I think it's much more an eye-opener to students that they can really have this personal assistance helping them. And needless to say, the test was like, he has never done as well, and I'm like, just use this stuff as much as you want if you can, perform in an oral test. So I think the education system is going to change, but I think we're going to do it it's going to be more, I think it's going to be harder for students to a certain extent, but it will also teach them more about language, topics, and I think people will become more creative as a result of this. So we basically finished language technology program number 1, but now we are doing number 2 these days. And in my mind, it's without a question that we need to continue from the government side, invest and continue the great cooperation that we've had with Almanna Rómur, Jóhanna and Sím and Ville, and all these individuals, almost about 60 individuals have been working non-stop on this for the last 4 years. And for us, that are in the exciting field of politics, it was kind of difficult to explain almost for 4 years. Yeah, we're like, there's a, word bank that is going to be change everything. But it's such a relief for us that we can basically see now what is being made. But we're not going to stop at OpenAI. We need to get the Icelandic into Siri, or I would say Edda. I want to be able to talk to my mobile in Icelandic, and they're going to answer in Icelandic. And you can, of course, do that also in OpenAI. But I think that we need to have applications that we can basically implement into these devices that we use on a daily basis. So we're going to continue working on that. The final words on this, it's only going to be successful if we do domestically our homework well, and then that we focus on international cooperation. If we wouldn't have visited these great individuals last spring, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have Icelandic in GDP and especially cooperation. And they were cooperating with 6 partners, and Iceland was one of them. And and it's a result of a fantastic government cooperation, and the private sector, and providing solutions that provides a great public good for everyone here in Iceland. So thank you very much. I look forward to working with you in the future, and I think that the framtíðin mjög björt á íslensku og það ótrúlega spennandi og gaman að hafa fengið að koma nálægt þessu því að ég held þetta sé eitt stæðsta hagsmunamál þjóðarinnar, ekki bara fyrir þá sem eru af íslensku bergi brotin, heldur líka fyrir alla þá sem eru að flytja og búa til gríðarleg verðmæti á hverjum einasta degi. Við skuldum þessu fólki að það sé hægt að nálgast tungumálið okkar og auðveldan og þægilegan hátt, og ef eitthvað næstu áskorun að halda áfram að hafa gott eða bæta mun betur aðgengi að íslensku námi til þess að tryggja það að íslenska verði tölu hér og við höldum áfram að skapa á íslensku. En takk fyrir.
Mér langar bara að þakka öllum kærlega fyrir komuna og Bjarni og Lilja fyrir að gefa ykkur tíma til að koma hingað í Kópavoginn og þeir sem voru að hlusta á netinu. Það eru spennandi tími framundan hvað þetta varðar, bæði fyrir fyrirtæki að nýta sér þau tækifæri og hið opinbera og líka að tryggja það að við búum til rétta ramman til að þetta gerist allt á farsælan hátt. Bara takk kærlega fyrir.